In this video, we are going to be looking at the creation of an agency. How is an agency relationship created? So, the creation of agency can be done in various ways, and each is governed by specific conditions under the law. And these include, the first one we have is the express agreement, also known as the express agency. So, this one occurs when a principal expressly appoints an agent to act on their behalf. So the agreement between the principal and the agent under express agency can be either oral or written, and with written agreements, they provide more clarity and serving as evidence in case of disputes. So this type of agency is established when the principal appoints an agent to act on their behalf. Then the example that we have of an express agency or express agreement by express agreement. For example, John wants to sell his house, but he's too busy to manage the sale himself. So he signs a written agreement with Mary, who is a real estate agent, authorizing her to find a buyer and negotiate the sale. So that is an express agency between John and Mary. Then the second one we have is by implied agreement or implied agency. Implied is something that doesn't need to be stated. So this type of agency is created by operation of law, and it occurs where there is no express agreement, like it is not stated, it's not said or written anywhere, but the agent's relationship is inferred from the conduct or circumstances. So this one is not expressly stated by the principal, but they depend on the relationship between the principal and the agent and their conduct and some other circumstances. So under implied agency, we have two key forms of implied agency, and the first one is agency by estoppel. So agency by estoppel arises when one party represents either by words or conduct that another person has the authority to act on their behalf. So agency by estoppel, just they depend on one party's representation that the other party has the authority to act on their behalf. So the principal acts like the other person has the authority to do anything they want on their behalf. For example, when Sarah owns a shop and often allows her friend Emma to come and handle customers and collect payments when Sarah is away. So one day Emma sells an item on credit. Sarah cannot later deny Emma's authority to make the sale because her actions implied that Emma had the authority to act on her behalf. So Sarah didn't state that Emma had the authority, but they were depending on the conduct, the way they were behaving. So according to their conduct, Emma is Sarah's agent by estoppel, because when he was acting like that, when Sarah was around, Sarah didn't stop him. So that is an agent by estoppel. So if a third party relies on this presentation, the principal is stopped from denying the agent's authority. So Sarah can't deny that Emma didn't have the authority to sell her goods on credit when she was not around. So that is an agent. We have agency by holding out. So agency by holding out is similar to agency by estoppel, but it involves positive actions or representations that lead others to believe that someone has the authority to act on behalf of another. For example, in a partnership, each partner is generally held as an agent of the partnership. Similarly, employers may be held liable for the actions of their employees who are perceived as acting with their authority. For example, an employee from Absa Bank can go to a customer and they collect a loan on behalf of the bank, even though they do not have the authority to do so. The other third party will believe that they do have the authority. So that is agency by holding out. For example, an employer introduces their assistant, Make, to clients as the person who handles the company matters. So if Make signs a contract with the client, the employer cannot deny that Make had the authority to do so. So that is agency by holding out. Yeah, so those are the two kinds of implied agency, the agency by estoppel and then agency by holding out. Way of creation of agency we have is the creation by necessity. So agency by necessity arises when an agent takes action on behalf of a principal in an emergency. Like the principal wasn't around and this person decides to act on their behalf. So it comes around because of necessity. So the agent takes action on behalf of a principal in an emergency, particularly to prevent harm or loss to the principal. Yeah. For example, if perishable goods are in danger of spoiling and then an agent sells them to avoid financial losses even without explicit instructions from the principal. However, for this agency to apply, the following conditions must be met. First of all, it must be impossible to contact the principal. Like you tried calling them, you can't reach them, or you were calling them, they were not replying, something. So it must be impossible to contact the principal, then you just act on their behalf. Then the second condition is that the agent must act in good faith with the principal's best interest in mind. Like they must not have any ill intentions or any evil intentions. Yeah, so they must act in good faith with the principal's best interest in mind. Well knowing that had the principal been around, they would have done the same thing. Yeah, then the action must be necessary. It must be necessary, like there is no other way out. So the action must be necessary. So those are the conditions that must be met in order for an agency by necessity to be created or emergency authority. Yeah. For example, if Lucy is shipping fresh fish to a customer, but the truck breaks down and the fish is at the risk of spoiling, then the truck driver is unable to reach Lucy. The truck driver sells the fish to the nearby market to minimize financial loss. So it will mean that the truck driver has acted on behalf of Lucy because he tried reaching Lucy and he couldn't, and the fish was going to get spoiled. The last agency we have is the agency by ratification. So this one occurs when one person acts on behalf of another without their authority. So the agent acts on behalf of the principal without the principal's authority. But then the principal later adopts or ratifies the action, treating it as though it was initially authorized. So for ratification to be valid, the following conditions must be met. So in the agency by ratification, the agent acts without the principal's authority. Then later the principal authorizes and he or she treats it as if he or she had authorized before the agent acting. So for ratification to be valid, an example can be David, without being asked, negotiates and signs a contract with a supplier on behalf of his friend Paul. So when Paul learns about it, he approves the deal because it benefits him. By approving it, Paul makes the contract legally binding as if David had authorized it from the start. that is agents by ratification. They first act without the principal's authority, then the principal later adopts it. Yeah. So for ratification to be valid, the following conditions must be met. First is that the agent must have claimed to be acting on behalf of the principal at the time of the transaction. So the agent must have stated that they're acting on behalf of someone else. Then the principal must have the legal capacity to ratify the contract or the transaction. They must be 18 years and above, of sound mind, etc. So they must have the legal capacity to ratify the transaction. Then the principal must ratify the entire transaction, not just parts of it. Yeah, so if they do not agree with the entire transaction, then that ratification won't be valid. So they must ratify the entire transaction, not just parts of it. Then the principal must have full knowledge of facts surrounding the agent's actions, and the transaction must be lawful. Then this retroactive approval by the principal makes the unauthorized act binding as if it had been initially authorized. So after it being authorized, it becomes legally binding. Then each type of